All right, everyone, hello. And I'm back, and I had a request from someone now that it's been, more than 2 weeks since the Deep in Night to come out, to just kind of go over my general thought process on builds for some of the characters and some of the relics that I choose. Full disclosure, before I really get into all the characters, I do not have a ton of playtime under Raider and Revenant. So when I get to those two, just, little grain of salt. It's not that they're necessarily bad in Deep of Night. A good player on a role like that is still going to be way better than a bad player on Iron Eye. But you've got certain roles that you like to fill in Deep of Night, and they do not directly fill either of those roles. So that's why I just don't play on them as much. They're more of like a fun pick. If you're playing with two good people, you want to have a good time, I think they're fine there. But first, let's start off Wilder. Wilder is not a fun pick. Wilder is an amazing pick. While I wouldn't say he's completely necessary, quote unquote necessary, is just a recommendation because there are a lot of people that fill similar roles. He fills a lot of stuff fairly easily. So let's get started. I'm going to be going over the normal relics and the deep relics and why I chose them. You're going to see a lot of overlap, and that's fine. So first thing on Wilder, you may have better split relics than the earring. You might, but at the same time, the earring fills so much of what you need. And what you really, really want on Wilder, especially with Deep of Night, is you absolutely want +1 additional character skill use. And you always, always, always want art skill spreads fire in an area. Stamina recovery on landing attacks is like, it's fine. It's neat. And the reason why the fire is so important is, especially with the Deep of Night and the changes there, you're going to be doing a lot of ulting. And having that fire damage under your ult, we've had people that have done damage calculation, Navarado, and he says, based on what he's looked at, you basically get double the damage value out of your ult. Now, Wilder's ult, it's not like it's going to really kill anything on its own. But when you're playing in a group, and especially with people, when they're going to be things like applying mark or doing Duchess restage or just like hitting things while they're on the ground, anything else like that, you always want this fire. And then on top of that, it's not just the damage and stuff to the enemies. When it's time to pick someone up, just one uncharged stake plus the fire goes so far. I think in almost a perfect scenario, that could like almost pick somebody up from 3 bars or get pretty damn close to it, especially, if you're also using your little hook shot there. So between his hook shot and his ult, he is surprisingly adept at picking up people. And we've used 1 relic slot. So a character that is already, very survivability because he can cheat death once, can also really come an amazing, clutch moment to pick up one or maybe both members of your team just with that one. So as we go through the other relics, keep in mind, you might not need the earring because you might have god relics that have +1 additional character skill use or activation spreads fire. I have other things that I want to use, so that's what I use. So the other 2 things I use, of course, we have Everjail. I find that in Deep of Night, you're almost never clearing all of the Everjails, but with a competent group, you're still going to be getting anywhere between 3 and 4 Everjails. That's going to be between 15 and 20% additional damage, and that's pretty hard to beat. On Wilder, I don't really worry quite as much about survivability. Of course, he's got his cheat death ability. He's got his grappling hook. So compared to some other characters, I'm not quite as worried. He's got normal iframes. In Night Invader, you're going to see this on almost everyone. Night Invader is almost the first thing I do now in all of my Deep 5 runs. Pretty much, you're going to do 1 point of interest just to help yourself get from 2 to 3. Sometimes, even at level 2, you want to go and look for some Night Invaders. If you didn't know, Grand Cathedrals and Forts have 1 Night Invader in them, and then Camps and Ruins will have 2. So if you target one versus the other, maybe go for the one first so you're not getting double teamed. And then that'll get you up to like level 5 and give you a good weapon to start with. And then once you fight the other one, I mean, that'll be 6 or 7, again, depending on how many other things and what else you get along the way. And then, you know, at the beginning of part 2 of day 1, you can go to the castle and you'll be level 7 and you'll have a good weapon and you can clear it very efficiently. This is just what I have. So, I mean, what you might do is you might do something, and I might discover something here. You do Everjail, Night Invader, and then you can do Wilder, and you can do +1 and Spreads Fire. And I just don't have anything yet. So that's fine. I've seen other people that do have things. I don't. You might, if you do that sort of search. Oh no, I got rid of my Night Invader. You might find something better. Okay. And don't sleep on critical hits, earn runes, especially early on at the beginning of day 1, when you first have that like little night thing comes in. You can, you know, usually get like 5 or 6 backstabs. It may not seem like a lot, but you know, an extra 4, 5, 6,000 runes early on can kind of help push you either into another level or, you know, could pay for a bag or something else. Okay, so in terms of my deep relics, I've got a little bit of a spread here. Most important thing on Wilder is character skill inflicts blood loss. This was already powerful, and then it was buffed to be even more powerful, on top of a relatively recent update that also made the grappling hook better at disrupting shields. So if an enemy is shielding, it's even better now at disrupting their poise and opening them up. So especially if you're going to have +1 character skill with moving around the map and picking people up, it now also does blood loss. So don't feel bad about spamming this on anything that can bleed. You can and should be using it. At least, you know, always have 1 off cooldown if you have this skill up. Defeating enemies fills more of Art Gauge +1. You don't necessarily need the +1. The normal one is just about as good. They do stack together. And what happens in most games, and it includes Nightreign, is in the beginning, people kind of undervalue ults. You know, maybe you don't have a lot of resources to get them up more often, but in all of these type of games, whenever you have an ult and you have the ability to have it up more often, you want to have it up. And especially in Nightreign, when everything is so timed and you've got such a limited amount of time to get everything done, beginning every engagement with an ult and then potentially ending every engagement with a second ult is just going to speed those encounters up so much faster. And for every bubble you get, you know, you're going to be that much more incrementally stronger for the Night Lord. So, you know, you always want to make sure, whether it's a jail or another major point of interest, you're killing some trash along the way, or your teammates are killing trash along the way, so that you can start it with an ult. I have here just 2 things just to keep them a little bit more survivable. You know, I think for other characters and for what you might also look for, if you've got like 1 physical attack +3 or +4, that might be nice. But for Wilder, you know, his ult does so much damage, and we already have these 2 scaling things here. This build, I feel kind of okay with that. Like, if I could, of course, just snap my fingers and change that fire attack up +3 to physical attack up +3, I would do that. Unfortunately, I can't. We don't have rerolling. And then I'm just going to be very survivable, right? I've got increased maximum HP, so that's 10%. And then max HP increased for enemy defeated at Great Church. That's 1.05 per church. So if you do 2 churches, it's at least as good as increased maximum HP. Should be slightly better. And then just through these runes, relics, I have 2 cases of improved flask HP restoration. It's not a huge deal, but it is nice. Your own personal relics, you might end up having something that has like poison or attack below max HP. And this might get you to the point where rather than having to drink 2 flasks, you only have to drink 1 flask. Other things to look out for, you know, physical damage negation, affinity damage negation, those are also both fine. Okay, up next is Guardian. Guardian is, of course, almost as bound by his relics as Wilder is. There's some that I would find, you just should be running if you're running Guardian. So the first would be slowly restores slowly restores allies' HP while art is active, and increased duration for character skill. So these 2 skills together, restoring HP is just so valuable for his ult. It's not just helpful for your teammates, it's helpful for you. It, in theory, gives you nearly infinite sustain, and it just makes so many other things possible that would otherwise be impossible in terms of being able to like hang out in the rain just a little bit longer as you're trying to finish a jail or whatnot. Of course, I've got a very good relic here. I've got something that has Night Invader. You may not have that on either of these two, and so you'll need to decide whether your third relic is going to be Night Invader or Everjail, and that's fine because, again, Guardian is providing a little bit more of a supportive role than necessarily going to be all in on damage, and that's okay. But that is not to say that you should not be doing damage as Guardian. The number one thing you should be doing on all characters is saying, how can I help my team kill things faster? And the best way to do that is just by having damage. The less times you have to swing is the less stamina you have to use and less time it takes to kill something. That being said, increased duration for character skill makes it so almost every humanoid type enemy in the game, and especially the two scariest Everjails. So you've got, the Beastmen and you've got the Banished Knights. It just completely changes those encounters. What would normally be some of the scariest encounters, suddenly, as long as nobody just runs into the middle of the pack and stands there, you should be easily able to clear. Even at a low level, at level 3, if the mutants show up, and I'm not saying I personally would route to a jail, even on the Guardian at level 3, but even if they show up, you should be able to clear it relatively easily. Not only that, if you have something that is HP on hit or FP restoration on hit, every tick of this skill is going to apply to that. So if your left hand has HP and your right hand has FP, throwing this out on something is going to constantly give you value from that. So I've got what I would say a really good setup here on Guardian. Attack power on Knight, and then Everjail and the skill, and then HP. You might have to do some searching. I do have Arc Gauge from Successful Guarding. I've been watching a lot of content creators, particularly in Japan, that have been playing Guardian and heavily using their shield. And obviously that is a play style, and they have gotten very, very good at managing their stamina and making that work on most encounters. Whether you know or not, all guarding in this game gives you 100% damage negation. Everything in the game has that. The issue that you have to worry about in Deep of Night is, are you going to be getting any sort of affinity damage taken, which different shields have different affinity levels, so you'll need to learn based on what shield you have, how much affinity damage negation you're going to have. And then on top of that, you're going to have to learn the very precise timing on both when to put up your steel guard in order to more effectively block an attack, what attacks can effectively be blocked, when to drop your steel guard to get enough stamina to block again, and then when you are safe with every weapon type to actually get a guard counter back. So it's not a simple process to play Shield Guardian. And the other issue is if you drop the shield, which honestly, for most players, it'll probably be easier just to play Guardian without a shield so you don't fuck up and get guard broken or just chipped out by affinity damage. He has the lowest iframes in the game. So most characters have 24 out of 60 iframes per second, or 24 frames out of a second. Guardian only has 20. And if we had a way of guaranteeing, or especially if we had a relic that increased iframes and we could put it on Guardian, we wouldn't have to have this conversation. I think the hard part comes into, you're playing Guardian, you get to a Night Lord, you've had 0 good amazing shield drops, you've gotten 0 good iframe drops. So you need to be really, really good to play Guardian, because it doesn't matter how tanky we make him, and I'm going to make him pretty tanky, you're not going to survive more than maybe 3 hits most of the time. So the survivability from here is going to help a little bit with that, because you could heal yourself up if you've taken a bit of damage. But otherwise, it's a challenge. You got to be good to play Guardian, but a good Guardian is very, very good. Okay, so skills that I have. Skills boost damage negation to nearby allies. I do like this ability. This is more for you than it is your teammates. Now, obviously, if your teammates are nearby when you do this, they do get the benefit. But it has a fairly short range in order of being able to help your allies out. So keep that in mind. You have to stay close to them. You might even you might have to decide, do I run to a slightly less ideal area to negate the damage on my allies, or do I place it better to hit more enemies? That'll be up to you to decide. I've got a okay relic here. I am generally not a fan of poison buildup when below max HP, but because he's able to heal himself to full, and because he's going to have such a high HP pool, I am not as worried about poison here. But normally I like to avoid things like this. I don't like continual HP loss. I don't like poison or rot buildup when below max HP. And then I have another one here for just physical damage negation. I could, in theory, just put physical attack up +4 in here, but I'm assuming that we're not going to be running a full team of Guardians, and so that my teammates will be helping with the damage a little bit more than I am. And again, I am running 2 damage relics, so I'm not going to feel that bad. Relatively early on, my damage will be online and it'll be okay. Okay, probably one of the most helpful characters in every composition, and I think at this point most other content creators are like into it, is Iron Eye, and that's for 2 reasons. I mean, two really big reasons. The first is his mark. His mark ability, I believe it's 20% more damage on the enemy, plus additional damage, and I don't know that exact amount, and stagger whenever the mark is cleared. So if you deal enough damage, I don't know whether it's normal damage or stagger damage, but if you deal enough damage to an enemy with mark on, the mark gets removed, and then the enemy takes a bunch of damage and stagger. So if you're playing as Iron Eye, if you want to play as Iron Eye, you better be willing to get in there and apply mark. I'm not saying you can't use a bow. Go ahead, use a bow. That's great. You could also use a melee weapon if you're really good, but make sure you're applying mark. This first relic here, this is a guaranteed relic. You don't necessarily need to use it. It is the ability to apply poison to enemies. You could, in theory, do a infusion of poison on your bow. Some people have used that and they like that. I personally didn't like it. I feel like it takes too long to build up the poison with the bow in that way. Not only that, but of course there's the serpent bow that is a, fairly common bow that gets dropped that you might, hopefully find throughout the course of your run, especially, again, if you're playing with people that they might keep an eye out for it and drop it for you if you need it. This is a great relic that I have here. +1 a character additional skill use. You're going to be using his ability constantly, and this is great for that. Obviously, it's got Night Invader. Iron Eye, again, isn't necessarily going to be doing the most damage directly. He mostly enables damage through the use of his mark and the clearing of the mark, and then his special ability on the deep relics. But, more damage is always more damage. And I'm, again, putting the Evergel relic here. If you've got a really great deep relic that has a stone sword key on it, you could switch off of this yellow one. At the same time, it is kind of nice just having Evergel and the stone sword key there. The more good your team is, the less necessary this is, or the more coordinated your team is, the less necessary this is. Especially if you're going to be running relics that give HP on Great Cathedral Clear. You're going to be searching a lot more cathedrals, in theory, finding a lot more keys, so this might be less helpful. But then again, you never know going into the map how many jails there are going to be. So if you land on a normal map and there's 7 jails, you're going to feel pretty happy having the stone sword key on you. So defeating enemies feels more of max arc gauge +1, maximum HP. Of course, more ults, the better. Again, if you're starting every engagement with an ult on Iron Eye, and you're adding a charge effect, so you're immediately poisoning everything with Iron Eye, and then we have this ability here that does heavy poison damage on poison enemies. You are starting off every engagement with the enemy already heavily damaged. So keep that in mind. This is a flex slot here. I could use this just for more survivability. I could do max HP on Church Clear. I could do physical damage negation. I think I just put this one on for fun. Again, defeating enemy feels more of arc gauge and arc gauge +1 stack. So on this particular build, I would be using my art a ton, which is great because I'm going to be continually making sure things are poisoned. And then I'm going to be dealing poison damage on them, and I'm going to be able to clear that mark on them. You can, again, switch this around a little bit, but for me, I think this is okay. I don't normally play a lot of Iron Eye. For me, this is a skill issue, personal issue. The triangle into L2 evasion, I feel like sometimes doesn't trigger for me. I think you got to make sure the triangle button is held and hit the left trigger. And I know this sounds ridiculous because I have no issue doing that in every other character. Sometimes with Iron Eye, if I'm staring someone down, I'm using the skill to evade, I fuck up. So I normally don't play Iron Eye, but if I did, I think this build would be pretty good, and I think most of my teammates would be happy to use it. Okay, a character I do play a ton of. I definitely use this character for almost the entire time going from rank 4 to rank 5 is Duchess. And it's nice because right off the bat, you can see I'm using the Everdark Augur Relic, which is increased maximum HP, continuous HP recovery, which is 2 HP a second, which is nice to offset any HP drain on any deep relics or any, negative affinity items or whatever negative items that you find during your runs. And the slowly restore HP for self and nearby allies when HP is low is also nice. What that is essentially doing is if you fall below 25% health, I think it's over the next, it's between 60 or 90 seconds, I forget, but somewhere in that range, it will recover 25% health. So it's not a lot, but in theory, you would always make sure you're taking yourself out of that critical HP range. So you find this will trigger the most often if you are running through, the rain, and it'll trigger there. Something else it'll do is if you've died and you get picked up, it'll help kind of top off your health a little bit. So it's just kind of a nice thing to have. It's not something I would go out of my way for. Certainly, it's not going to work in the same way on Duchess as it would on like a Guardian or a Raider, where you might be able to even live in that range a little bit with improved damage negation at low HP. If you want to use that sort of a meme build, but it's something. Okay, attack power for Night Invader defeated. Duchess, you are absolutely filling a role where you're going to want to be dealing as much damage as possible. Ultimate Arc Gauge +3 is great. Critical hits earns runes. I've used this a lot, again, in my early games. I wouldn't go out of my way for that line, of course, but it is nice. So I'm just using this here. Attack power increased for Evergel defeated, of course, is great. There is, of course, character skill attack power. I wouldn't really target any of these other skills, but if you did have anything that was one of these two, right, I would absolutely take that. Making her character skill stronger or making her character skill come back more often, I think are both good. In fact, maybe I could even... So I was running this for a while now that I think about it, but again, it's the sort of thing, if you're in a situation where you're short a key because you didn't run the other relic, you could be in trouble. So if you know you're coordinating with two people and they're both going to be bringing a key, I would maybe consider switching out to this red just to get my ability up more often. But for now, I'm using that. So, but before I get into my deep relics, I do want to talk a little bit about her deep things here. So I've heard people say that they like doing you Paladin Duchess, Sacred Seal Duchess. I personally wouldn't go out of my way for that. I mean, all right. That's the one thing. The difference between her and Recluse, right? She would be a little bit like the Revenant in that she's going to be spamming incantations. Nice thing about incantations is they are much more FP efficient in general than things that you might get off of staves. You know, she gets 13 faith. That puts her at about 40 faith, which makes her just as good at incantations as she is magic. I guess my issue would be, what additional utility are you really giving your team by side grading in incantations as opposed to just sticking with magic? Especially when, you know, she kind of fits very nicely with Kyrian Sword Sorcery anyways. It's not necessarily a wasted slot. Of course, it provides you some flexibility, although at the same time, you are impairing your ability to use sorceries anyways. This to me feels like a side grade at best, if not, you know, almost like a waste of a slot, but that is what it is. I always run improved vigor and strength, reduced mind. I don't mind the reduced mind. I know she works very well as a spellcaster, but I feel like if you really wanted to focus on spellcasting, that's kind of what the Recluse is there for. You know, she's going to have, Recluse specifically is going to have her continual sustained FP restoration, which is going to be vital towards focusing on getting your spells out often as possible. Whereas improved vigor and strength, now you've done a couple of things. So you've greatly improved your survivability. You've improved your flexibility to use maybe the slightly faster strength-based weapons, and even daggers benefit in some small way from strength scaling. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need to use a spear or fists or claws or anything else that's like quality like that, you're going to get a sizable boost to your damage. And again, if you're running a Duchess, her role is dealing damage. Now, use character skill for brief and vulnerability. I know there's people that like really freak out about this, and they use this as a way to say, I'm going to be able to evade frost damage I'm taking, or I'm going to use this to evade damage from being grabbed. But the whole thing is like, if you're playing Duchess, we've talked about iframes before. She doesn't even need iframes up, but if you get iframes up, she is the most survivable character in the game. Like, her iframes are just absolutely insane. As long as you just do your best to focus on evading when you're being targeted, you're almost never going to die. And again, in Deep of Night, your most important thing is not dying. Now, that being said, you're still seeing me use increased maximum HP, not just twice, but technically 3 times. And that's because sometimes you will take a hit. And Duchess, if you're in close and you take a hit, you always want to be in a situation where you could take 1 hit and not die. Because I could give you 1,000 flasks, but if you're getting 1 shot by everything, it doesn't matter because you're dead. So again, it doesn't have to exclusively be maximum HP. Your own relics might be improved physical damage negation, improved affinity damage negation. Those work just as well when you stack them all together, right? Because you have to think about, what is my effective health pool? You can stack health, which is technically a way of resisting everything, resisting damage until you're dead. You can stack physical damage negation on top of your health, which gives you more effective physical health per life, or improved affinity damage negation per life. She shouldn't need too much additional damage if you have improved vigor and strength. And again, if you're running Everjail and Night Invader, her damage, especially by the time you get to the Night Lord, is going to be very good. In terms of putting like improved affinity attack power, fire attack power, stuff like that, keep in mind that her specific drop pool seems to lean, I guess the least common is going to be lightning. She's got a lot of really great holy weapons that'll drop for her. She might have some good magic weapons that'll drop for her. I feel like she gets rivers fairly regularly, so fire isn't terrible either, depending on what you're going up against. But in general, if I could again snap my fingers, between all of those, I think I would just boost her physical damage. Just because you want to make her early game as powerful as possible. Her early game kind of struggles until she really starts going online, because she's just got one little dinky dagger with a relatively mid thing that goes on top of that. Okay, so I said before, Raider is one of the characters I've had less success with in terms of having a great run, because I'm trying to think like what role is he playing? And again, his role is in some small ways to be kind of like a guardian, in that he's not going to die. And if he were to get targeted in some way, he could use his skill to almost survive anything, right? So if he uses his normal character skill, you have a short period of time where you're not going to die. If he's got his enhanced character skill and you're being targeted, it's going to be a very long period of time before you die. But of course, as soon as the skill is over, you can just go back to being dead. So it is very important to keep that in mind. Like Guardian, he does have reduced iframes. So every other character, the default is 24. His is 22. So he's slightly less good at evading than other characters. It's part of the reason why Jump Raider is kind of popular. Jump Raider, you're going to be more regularly having moments of iframes while you're in the air doing your attack. Also, jumping compared to his normal Colossal Weapon moveset is also just kind of better in terms of your opportunity cost. You're going to be able to do much higher bursts of damage versus going through a full Colossal Weapon string. And so, for him still, I would want to stack damage on him. So Night Invader and Everjail, of course, I would put them on there. I'm not crazy for any of his default abilities here. You know, taking damage, if you had this for free, of course I would take it. Duration of ultimate art extended. If you don't know how to place your art, you got to really think about it. So there's like several stages to art placement. One IQ is placing your ultimate directly on the enemy. If you are a really bad raider, this is how you play raider. You go in, you target the enemy, and you drop the rock right on him. This makes it so the buff you're giving your team, right? Stella gives you, I think it's like 20% extra damage. And at one point, this doesn't buff spell damage. I don't know if that's been changed or if it's intentional to only being physical damage, but keep it in mind if you were in a composition that includes a Recluse or a Revenant, or maybe even a Duchess, maybe don't pick Raider, because I don't know if it's been tested recently. The Stella did not improve those damage types. So if you're doing this, you're making it so nobody can attack the enemy. So that's level 1. That's the worst thing you do. Level 2 is I'm going to place it near the enemy, so they're going to take damage, but my allies are not going to be blocked from attacking it. Now, the highest IQ play, and this is again very dependent on the encounter that you're going into, is using it in a way that you split up the enemies without, you know, disrupting your enemy's attacks. So imagine these guys are both Stone Lords. You've got two teammates attacking the one on the right. You can make it so this left Stone Lord gets blasted away. He's stuck behind your rock, and yet all of your team is still able to attack this guy. Of course, you can use it to help recover teammates. They will get put up on the rock. You can maybe, you know, get some attacks off up there. But in terms of, you know, bringing teammates back, I would say it's on the lower end. So in terms of increasing the duration, you know, the damage buff will be available for a little bit longer, but I don't want to be out here telling people to run anything like that, because my concern is I'm going to be getting one of you glue eaters that's going to be taking that and then just trolling their team for even longer. Of course, defeating enemies and improved poise. I don't think anything about that at all. So most of his stuff is going to be fairly standard. In terms of special skills, I believe this most recent patch did improve the duration of character skill to reduce enemy attack power. And if you're going to be running the Raider, you may as well be using that. I mean, you need to be able to establish to your team, you know, outside of just a fun pick, that you're providing some amount of value. And that's basically the only thing he can do, is just do that to maybe help your team survive possibly one additional hit. Maybe. Improved arcane, reduced vigor. I would be very hesitant to ever do anything that would reduce your survivability, and especially such a pick like improved arcane that's already kind of a nebulous stat as it is. Of course, it in theory increases the rate with which you apply ailments, right? But against things that are already weak to the ailment you're trying to apply, I don't know that most things are going to be alive long enough where it's going to matter, right? So if you're fighting the Night 1 or Night 2 boss, you've got all the time in the world to, you know, apply the ailment they're weak to. You know, do you want to run Raider like, you know, a worse Executor? And how much arcane is this anyways? Let's just double check that. So he gets 17 arcane. That takes him from 10 arcane up to 27 arcane. So that puts him basically on par. I would assume it would be a similar stat growth as the Executor. So would you rather play Raider or Executor? Executor doesn't have to do anything to get the same value as Raider does, and he still has the ability to parry. He's got normal iframes, and he's got an ult that'll heal him all the way. And he's got a weapon that starts with bleed, which is already something that scales from arcane. Or do you want to try and put it on Raider and gamble that you're going to get a Giza wheel or something else like that that will be arcane beneficial? Do you want to give up one of your normal relic slots to imbue your weapon with a status effect, or a skill that's going to apply a status effect? I mean, these are all things you have to think about. What is the trade-off for that? If I had a God Relic that had this, would I run it? He loses 80 health. I mean, he's got a high health pool anyways. Out of all the characters, I guess he could maybe afford to lose it the most. But even still, all that scaling that you get in terms of improved health, you're basically taking his health down to being wilder tier by doing that. So just use this one. Otherwise he's going to have, again, less iframes than normal. You probably want some damage negation. And then, his ult, even though I'm not huge on it, is still an ult. So if you're using it to boost your allies' damage, or if you're using it to separate enemies, or just to damage and knock down enemies, you still want to use it. But out of all the characters in the roster right now, I think Raider would probably be the last one that I would want to pick. And then the next one would probably be the Revenant. Now, that's not because she's bad. Part of it is particularly like fire and lightning spells. I just don't have enough personal experience at aiming them that I'm able to apply them somewhat consistently. When you're playing the Recluse, most sorceries are really great at homing in on the enemy and making sure that you're going to be dealing the damage to the enemy that you need to deal. For her, there's going to be a lot of enemy knowledge that you're going to need in order to make sure that you time it correctly. And then not only that, your reliance on needing a spell casting speed +1 or +2, depending on the spell, to even more reliably hit the enemy is there as well. So she's going to be a very high skill ceiling character. I still think I would rather have her than a Raider, but it's going to be a high skill ceiling. And right now I don't feel comfortable that I'm there yet. So again, I could give you 1,000 flasks. It doesn't matter if you're getting one shot. I think for her, especially with the amount of damage she normally does, increased maximum HP is okay. I do have here an ability, Strengthen Family and Allies when Ultimate Art is activated. I believe it's 25% additional damage. It's 25% damage for 30 seconds. So in terms of being like a support character in some way, or a flex pick, she's there to enable the rest of the team to deal a lot of damage. And again, the way she kind of works is she's going to have a certain amount of burst damage that she's going to do throughout most of day 1 and day 2, because you don't really want to be burning Starlight Shards. And when that's gone, it's pretty much gone. You don't really want to be running in there with melee as Revenant, even with some survivability, because her stats just don't really lend themselves to being that helpful there. Now, you'll notice here, I don't have Everjail or Night Invader. And I would love to have both of those. I would love to have both of those on both of these relics. But my concern is that when you play Revenant, most of the time, what utility are you playing in the early game? And if you've got a really good team, if you're playing with 2 really good players, you could switch these over to Dragon Communion's incantations, or Frenzied Flame, or whatever the dragon one is that improved flame, and have that, and Night Invader and Everjail, and I think that would be great. But if you want to have more general utility, her damage is going to be pretty good, assuming you're actually lining her up with a Night Lord that is going to be weak to lightning, or you're going to be lining her up against somebody that's weak to fire. I wouldn't be quite as concerned about scaling the damage in that way as I would about her early game. I think the last pick you could change, like this last one here, like I'm a little bit on the fence. Like if I knew someone else was coming and bringing Hoarfrost Stomp, I would 100% change this off. Probably for Night Invader, maybe for Everjail, and I would run that. But knowing what I know, which is to say, increased max FP on ability activation. Every time you kill an enemy, or one of your summons kills an enemy, this improves your FP scaling a little bit. It did get nerfed in the most recent patch. I still think it's worth using, but that's what it's there for. You're getting this because you need to get kills so you can get more FP, so you can spam your spells more often. And then, of course, when you use the Starlight Shard, that is restoring a percentage of your max FP. So then you're making your Starlight Shard economy for the Night Lord even better. This is a build where I've added fire attack power here. If it were a lightning build, I would either use lightning attack power, or you could also use affinity attack power, or you could use incantations plus. That would be fine. This one is a little bit more damage, and again, it's defeating enemy, fills more of the arc gauge. For her especially, you want to be starting off every engagement that you can with an ult so that your team is boosted so that you can clear that engagement more, just faster. It's just so helpful to have it up, and especially for her, where she's going to be providing especially just a support role in the beginning. Any other ways you can enable your team to do better would be better. Now, I don't know exactly. I haven't played with this build enough to know whether just this increased maximum HP and the HP for churches is going to be enough survivability so that she could survive one hit. I suspect that it is, but it also probably depends on the hit that she's going to take. So that is Revenant. Again, you could switch around the relics appropriately between fire and lightning. I would hesitate to recommend taking holy. And the reason for that is it feels like holy spells are just so rare that unless you spent the entire game and had your entire team on the lookout for a holy incantation, there is still a reasonable chance that you wouldn't get one, right? And even then, what are you going to have? The ring? Or the 3 rings? I mean, it's a good spell. Don't get me wrong. It is a good spell. But I would be scared. She's very good at dealing holy damage, but you got to get the holy damage, and there's no guarantee that you'll get it. So feel free to disagree with me there, but that's been my experience playing as her. All right, next up, Recluse. Recluse, in theory, in almost all engagements, is going to be dealing the most damage out of everybody. And fortunately, she doesn't struggle early game. I mean, obviously, Glintstone Pebble and Glintstone Arc are going to be dealing the most damage, but she's going to be okay. So I've got a really great relic here. I've got Crystallian Sorcery on top of Night Invader, and then I've just got the normal Everjail. And then, of course, I've got Life again. Recluse has among the best iframes in the game. I think it's actually like 30 frames. I think it's almost a half second of iframes every time she evades. But I don't really know how that chains, right? So I think there's a moment after evasion where she's vulnerable. So unlike Duchess, even though her base iframes are really good, you're going to have a moment where you can take damage. So again, unless you get a whole ton of iframe ups, you want to use her evasion to kind of get away from enemies rather than you want to use it to be like up close diving in. Even though she has, I guess, now the ability to be boosted in the sense that she's got some deep relics that improve her physical scaling. I would not use her like that in depth 5. So, of course, you could be putting like her normal, if you had like God Roll relics, all of her things are good now, right? So Blood Loss for increased attack power is great, especially if you've got people that have taken increased attack power and Blood Loss. That's cool. Maximum HP actually does give you a lot of HP. So when you're going into the daily engagements and you're popping your ult continually, this is going to make her incredibly tanky and survivable for those engagements. I don't go out of my way for it because when it's time for the Night Lord, you just can't count on it being up all the time. If it were enough to be 100% of uptime on the Night Lord, we would all take it. But it's only going to be up periodically. So this will make your days probably a lot smoother, but not anything that I have the ability to take it on. And then Affinity Residue activates Terra Magica. Terra Magica is really great, but in Deep 5 especially, standing still or feeling like any amount of pressure to stay still in an engagement will probably get you killed. And again, this is not to say with the right team that's great at managing aggro, this isn't an amazing skill. This will definitely increase your damage. But I would rather, for the relics that I have, get the same value permanently, all the time, unconditionally, between Night Invader and Everjail, rather than irregularly getting things that only happen on ult or periodically when I'm able to create Terra Magica. Okay, again, her ult is fine. You know, her ult is great for giving people sustain, not just normal sustain, but also, you know, their FP sustain. And I'm going to want to have this up pretty much at the beginning of every engagement. If you didn't know, it also, I don't know if it is specifically reducing, I think it specifically reduces the enemy's magic resistance. So when you do it, they become weaker as well. So even if you don't need the HP or FP, and if you're not, even if you're not using the HP recovery on her, you want to start most engagements like this because the enemies are just going to die faster because you'll be dealing more damage to them. Improved sorceries, of course, fine. This is kind of a god roll. Sorceries +2 and Crystalline sorcery is just great. One issue to keep in mind, even with spell casting speed +2, if you're using Shattering Crystal, you have to be really careful. The spell takes a little bit of time to come out, and you've got to be pretty close to the enemy. So this is a little bit more of like a higher skill ceiling play anyways, especially if you're stacking Crystalline sorcery. But it is also like really, really powerful. And again, if you're playing Recluse, you want to deal damage. So it's the sort of thing, you know, similar to Revenant, you need to really learn your matchups and your timings in terms of when is this skill safe to use and when should I just be using the equivalent of Glintstone Pebble so I'm not stuck in attack animation and die. And then I've just got here sorceries +2 and damage negation +1. So it's a pretty nice, like I've got really an amazing build on Recluse. I've got a lot of boosted sorceries, so I'm very flexible across the line. I've got 2 Crystalline sorceries, so my Crystalline sorceries are going to be hitting even harder. And I've got scaling on everything. So I really probably should be playing more Recluse. I like playing Duchess because I know I could survive with Duchess, and with Recluse, I'll probably die. But I don't know. Maybe I'll do some more runs. Depending on the Night Lord, I can do it, right? So if I'm playing against the Gaping Maw or something like, Fulgur or something like that, I could probably afford to play as Recluse. But against something like Holstor or something like Everdark Gladius, I would not want to play Recluse just because I would worry I'd be dead. Maybe Hellstorm I'm good enough now I could play Recluse, but maybe not. Okay, and then next up is Executor. So Executor is, in theory, an amazing early, like, day 1, day 2 beast. You know, status ailments are so good in this game. You know, bleed is one of the best status ailments early on anything that it's afflicted by bleed. Frost is like a mini bleed and also is really good. And I've got, you can see right here, an amazing relic for it. And then poison, poison is fine too. If you're fighting Crucible Knights, getting a poison out on them is great, in addition to frost and rot on them, just to kind of help chip them down because of how tanky they are in general. So one of the skills definitely I think is worth bringing. If you've ever have an ability to bring something where you are able to heal your teammates, I think that's worth bringing. You in theory have indefinite sustain. But the problem is if you're playing with randoms and like they don't get it, there's a lot of times, and it's less with Executor because you could just scream at them. But if you're playing as Guardian, there's been so many occasions where I've played with randoms, even in depth 4, even in depth 5, where you'll put your healing field down and they'll just run out of it. What are you doing? Like you'll pick that. Like I've actually picked people up as Guardian before. They've run out of the field and then drank a potion. Like I don't get it. Why are you here? Okay. And okay, rant over. So this is an amazing, amazing relic. Again, nearly a god roll relic. I've got the one roll, one character specific roll I would want to have, restore HP. I've got Hoarfrost Stomp. So now not only am I able to better inflict bleed, now I can inflict ice as well. So amazing roll. Ultimate Arc Gauge +2. I've had debates with people before and they've tweaked out. They're like, oh, Ultimate Arc Gauge is too slow. It doesn't matter. It only applies while you're in battle. Well, if it gets you an additional 2 ults over the course of a normal day, it's already pretty good. And then once you're in the Night Lord, I mean, all you got going for you is the ultimate art gauge, you know. Ultimate art gauge +1 or normal is doing nothing for you. And, you know, a lot of times getting your ultimate art once or twice more during a Night Lord can make a huge difference. Here's a Night Invader. Again, you've seen this relic of mine before. It's just more ultimate art gauge. Again, like I would normally value this quite a bit less than art gauge on kill, but the fact that they're both there helping each other out, I think is very good. And then for Executor specifically, I think I like this relic here. You know, he doesn't have improved iframes, but getting the additional vigor on him, I think, is going to help a lot for survivability. He has among the highest damage negation stats in the game. So for physical damage negation, he's similar to like Guardian, but his total health pool is very low. So I feel okay using this. Again, depending on my team composition, who I was playing with, I would consider swapping it out for the normal yellow relic that has the key on it. But I kind of like this one. So I put it on him because it shores up his weakness. His weakness is he's got great damage negation, but he doesn't have enough health. This helps with that. So I like that there. Of course, you've seen this relic and everything. Be careful when you use the Executor ultimate. So it more serves as like a Guardian ultimate than anything else. So you're using it to disrupt a crowd, to stun a single enemy, but just be aware of your team composition and the positioning. So you don't want to be attacking the enemy away from your team. If you know your attacks are going to be staggering the enemy, you want to be positioned so that you're still moving the enemy into your team and not away from them. Because what you could do is you could ult and then scream or attack away the boss that everybody's trying to attack, and like your fat dog ass is in the way of everyone, and they can't hit the enemy. Now, obviously, if you're playing with like an Iron Eye and a Recluse, doesn't really matter, right? They're going to be at range the whole time anyway, so maybe go crazy. Maybe you want to push the enemy away from them. But, you know, if you're playing with like a Wilder and like a Duchess who's got melee or something like that, then just be aware of what you're doing with your abilities to get them away. There's nothing wrong with ulting up, getting everyone up to max HP, attacking a little bit, and then just finishing it with your strong attack. I think that's fine. So this all right. Deep specific things on Executor. We've got improved dexterity and arcane, reduced vigor. We've got improved vigor and endurance, reduced arcane. We've got slowly restore HP and ability activation. This bottom ability there, this is for the God player. If you are good enough to use this on a regular basis, you probably don't need it. But it's really great. I mean, it would, in theory, give you indefinite sustain on top of your indefinite sustain, but you probably don't need it. I hesitate in Deep 5, like I said, to take anything away from your survivability. Again, if I gave you 1,000 flasks, you're dying in one shot, they don't matter. So, does Executor need more dexterity and arcane? He already has the highest dexterity and arcane in the game. He has more dexterity than Iron Eye. He has more arcane than anyone else. Now, I haven't done, and I don't know that anyone else has done the math on what that scaling looks like. You know, he's going to get 9 arcane, he's going to get 12 dexterity. What is the damage difference? It can't be by that much. If this said improved strength by 12 and arcane by 9, I would look at it much more favorably, because you're going to be going way harder into the soft caps and maybe even to the hard cap by doing that. But he doesn't really need any more dexterity. And I don't like the idea of reduced vigor. If you had God rolls across the line and you were really pumping him with vigor, I could see maybe taking it. But he doesn't, you know, you're going to be hitting the wall so hard on arcane activations after the 3rd or 4th application that I don't know that the extra arcane is going to matter. So what you do see, though, is I did put improved vigor and endurance. So you basically get your arcane back to everyone else. So you're like, why the hell would you play Executor in the first place? And I think part of the reason is his drop pool is going to be giving you a lot of katanas and claws and stuff like that. That's going to be good for applying arcane anyways. You know, a lot of my thought process is, where is this additional value coming from? You know, any Night Lord you're going to be fighting, most Night Lords, they're either so weak to the ailment, or it's going to be a part of your weapon anyways, that you're going to be applying it just by attacking normally, that getting it 1 or 2 hits earlier isn't going to make a significant difference. Likewise, most normal enemies you're going to be fighting throughout day 1 and day 2, by the time you've applied your 3rd application, they're already dead. So I'm kind of okay losing the arcane. Feel free to debate me in the comments, but I think this is fine. And again, one of the biggest issues in Executor, he's got great damage negation. He's just got relatively poor vigor. So it's good, but you know, compared to the chunkier boys, he's just got a little bit less HP. And this goes quite a bit of a way. I think it's 100 HP he gets from that. And plus the endurance is nice too. You know, you could R1 spam a bit more. And then I just have here, you can see on these 2 things, I've got physical attack up +3 twice. So my thought process is you're going to need something to not only continue to kill enemies day 1 and day 2, but when you get to the Night Lord, if you're playing Executor, you're only going to be getting a couple applications of that status. And then you're going to need something else to shore you up on the back end. Of course, Executor has a great fire weapon in Rivers of Blood. Jesus. I mean, let me just go to the sparring grounds. How many other katanas are there that spawn with an element on them? I mean, that's physical. That's physical, you know, with added scaling. That's fire. I guess that's magic, but nothing is out of their way magic. And the physical scaling outweighs the magic scaling anyways. Physical scaling is better. So, you know, maybe mostly out of all the characters, but especially for him, if there's going to be a character you're going to stack physical attack on and somebody who needs it the most, I think it'd be the Executor. Okay, so this has been almost an hour of just discussion about Nightreign. Hopefully you watch this while you're like, I don't know, eating breakfast or dinner or something. Maybe on your commute into work. Yeah, I'll see if I could put chapters in this because I'm assuming a lot of you are probably going to skip around. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed it. I know some of you are like, where's my Omega content? Too bad. Maybe in a week or 2 I'll make a video, but probably not. Don't count on it. All right, I'm leaving. Thank you. Goodbye.